For today's agenda, we're going to do a welcome and roll call, followed by a quick check-in. And we're actually going to be uplifting some of the suggestions from our last meeting around, like, wouldn't it be cool to get to know the organizations that are represented across this table a little bit better? And we're going to continue to build on that over the next couple of months. So pulled together just some very high level overview information for each of you all to review and actually share about what role you represent, what organization you represent, and what your role is as we go through tonight, and really creating an opportunity just for you all to learn about the work, the geographic diversity that's represented on the task force, those who are represented on the task force that happen to have lived experience within some of the systems in the state of Oregon. We'll spend the bulk of our time tonight just hearing from one another. It was quite interesting as I was going through all the websites and looking at the missions and, you know, some of the territories and the work that y'all are doing. And it's pretty amazing that we've got you all as a convening body around homelessness and racial disparities for the state. So I hope you'll find it interesting. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about next steps, and then we'll do a checkout. So this is a listing of the task force members. Definitely want to welcome Paige Spence, who's in for Ariel Nelson this evening. As well as Rowan Schwartz, who is in for Vanessa Timmons. Just as a gentle reminder, if any of you are ever unable to attend one of these meetings, you are well within your right to send a proxy in your place. We just ask that you give me a heads up so I can make sure that I've got all of their information down.
Thank you for introducing me. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to note that I do see Ariel Nelson on the screen as well, representing League of Cities. I'm Paige Spence, and thank you for having me. I'm here as a proxy for Jessica from AOC, Association of Counties. No problem. Just wanted to clear it up for the group. Thank you.
I will amend that. Thank you. And I apologize for getting the two.
No problem at all. I just wanted to set it straight for your record. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Appreciate it. With that being said, let's go ahead and do a bit of a roll call here. So Ariel is here. Paige is representing Jessica Pratt. Jimmy Jones, present. Paula Hall, present. Jennifer Parrish Taylor, present. Is Katrina Holland here? I did see an acceptance of the invite. Okay. Is Marisa here? All right. And Rowan. Hey there, Rowan. Nicole is here. Is Alan here today? Not looking like it. Jill is here. Senator Jama here. Not yet. Okay. Senator Anderson is here. Representative Zika. Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
Welcome, welcome. And I'm not seeing anyone else, but I do know we are expecting at least one other task force member. Since we do have some new folks in the room, do you want to introduce yourselves prior to jumping into the organizational snapshots?
I would just like to say hi to everybody, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Smith. I am the Interim Director of Housing Stabilization, and I'm taking Andrea's, Director Bell, seat as she's transitioned into, as you all know, our agency director. And I'm thrilled to be here, excited to get to know you all. Thank you.
Welcome, Jill. All right, and feel free to expand as we go into our next part of the meeting. As you see your organization or the organization that you're proxying for, there's some information, again, high-level overview please, please, please share your own perspective about how you work with the organization, what lens you bring, and we'll get that underway right after we do our quick check-in question. Wanted to start off kind of in a light way. There's been a lot happening, at least on the national landscape, at least in the area I live in, and I'm certain that there are a number of things happening at the state level and in your local communities. So check-in question for today, we can just popcorn it. But what is something that you came across recently that gave you hope or inspiration? You can feel free to come off mute. You can also drop it in the chat, but we want to start on a more inspirational note tonight.
Well, I know from my perspective, I'm a middle school math teacher, and my 8th graders that just got promoted to high school are just some phenomenal young people, and I am really excited to see where they go. I'm really inspired to see the next generation that's coming out that's going to be in charge, because I think they've got it. They're wonderful.
That definitely gives us hope. Today was our last day of school. So I'm excited and nervous because it's summer break. Who else has some recent inspiration or hope to share? Thank you, Paige, for uplifting that. Like a return to normal. As normal as this can be. Who else has some hope to share?
I can go next. We're part of a coalition that every year asks for policy proposals so that we can narrow down what our priorities are going to be for the legislative session. And I think it was just really hopeful to see that there is just a lot of really good ideas and solutions to some really systemic issues that we have, and really looking towards how do we make Oregon a more equitable state, but also building the future we want to see, and starting to do that work or continue to do that work kind of every day. People just put in the time and the effort, even if we're tired, even if we're at our capacity or beyond, folks just continue to show up.
Awesome. I see something coming through the chat as well. Everyone's showing up today, and there are a number of you here, so that's super exciting. I know we're up against summer, we're up against COVID, vacations, and just your regular day-to-day responsibilities. So appreciate each of you for being in community today. Welcome, Marisa. Good to see you as always. We are just doing a quick check-in. Ask the group to share what's something that you came across recently that's given you hope or inspiration.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm Marisa Espinosa, she, her pronouns, and I work with Northwest Pilot Project in Multnomah County. And, I'll just share, as far as hope, there are so many things swirling, so I can see why this question is being asked. And I will be honest, it is hard to find that hope. But one thing I will say is, I mentioned this at the last meeting, and it's part of why I'm late today. I'm in a policy grad program right now, and I'm just constantly inspired by the folks that I'm attending classes with and the work that they do in their communities. We have a lot of really incredible advocates and folks who are making change, and we've had a lot of conversations recently about, really looking at leadership from a more collective lens. And that just really rings true when it comes to, I feel like the work of this task force is just really re-envisioning structures in ways that give communities more power. So yeah, I hope that's somewhat relevant to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I love the range of responses from 8th graders to, current adult learners in a shared cohort to real change, meaningful change. Anyone else want an opportunity to share? No pressure at all. I do want to be one.
I can share. So Ariel from League of Oregon Cities. Something that gave me a lot of energy and hope was I facilitated the first meeting of the pilot communities that were funded in House Bill 4123 this past session. Last week on Friday, the cities and counties who are standing up coordinated offices met for the first time to just kind of compare notes on where they're at and share kind of how they wanted to kind of collaborate and work together, technical assistance and that kind of a thing. And so there was just a ton of energy, and it really felt rewarding to me to hear everything that they're working on. And I look forward to helping connect the dots between their efforts and this effort so that we can ensure that the systems that they're setting up in place are not perpetuating disparities and are really taking that important lens to their work. So I'll stay tuned, but it was definitely energizing. This work is so difficult for the folks that do this every day, and to hear that there's fresh energy at the local level to continue tackling this problem was motivating for me.
Thank you for that. And feel free as we get to your time to shine to expand on that even more. So I think everyone that wanted an opportunity has had an opportunity, and I certainly hope that each of you are inspired and that something resonated with you. We're going to move right into organizational snapshots. I have been kind of scouring the internet to learn a little bit more about each of your organizations, based again on the feedback from the last meeting about like, hey, let's get to know one another. So before we kind of get into the interpersonal relationships, let's talk about organizations and who you're representing. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the Association of Oregon Counties. Just again, high level overview, and then I would invite you to just talk about the Association of Oregon Counties. Association is a statewide organization representing Oregon's 36 counties. It was established in 1906 to provide a forum for information sharing, and has since evolved, as I understand it, to provide a variety of functions and services really to support the counties in Oregon along with the work that they do. So spotlight on Paige to kind of talk about your lens, your view. Take about 3 to 5 minutes, and if folks have questions for Paige, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Mary Frances. And I will actually be much briefer than 3 to 5 minutes. I'm actually Washington County Government Relations rather than being employed by AOC. But I'll kind of give you my contacts as an AOC member rather than an AOC staffer. And for folks who are new to the group or missed the beginning, Jessica Pratt is who I'm proxy for this evening. She is one of the government relations folks at the Association of Oregon Counties, and she covers healthcare, human service delivery, and housing and homelessness in her portfolio. She may have more. From where I sit, the Association of Oregon Counties is just amplifying the voice in Salem of most Oregon counties. There are 36, as Mary Frances mentioned, but only a few of the large counties actually have lobbyists on staff, and that's me for Washington County, or I'm one of them. And so for the smaller or more rural communities, they mostly work through AOC, and then for those of us who are on staff as individual county lobbyists, we kind of all work together to add capacities for common goals. There are kind of several associations that AOC has official relationships with as well that bring subject matter expertise. And so for the sake of this group, the Housing Authorities of Oregon would be one of those, as well as the community mental health programs. And I think I will just stop there and say thank you for including me. But Jessica, I'm sure would be happy to speak offline with you all. And she would have been here this evening, but it is actually the Association of Oregon Counties sort of big day where all of the county commissioners are convening in Hermiston, Oregon to kind of refine AOC's legislative vision for the next several years. So Jessica may have some more to share in light of that, but thank you for having me and thank you for the work that you all do.
Thanks so much, Paige. Any questions with the caveat that Paige is serving as a proxy and does not actually work for AOC? I'm doing a room scan, a virtual room scan, and I don't see any. So I'm going to move us along. Just want to highlight this. I do not believe Marcus Mundy is with us. Marcus is a task force member who leads the Coalition of Communities of Color, and just wanted to share their information. The mission for them is to address socioeconomic disparities, institutional racism, and inequity of services experienced by families, children, and communities, as well as to organize those communities for collective action resulting in social change to obtain self-determination, wellness, justice, and prosperity. So I can't answer any questions, but many of you have worked with Marcus in different capacities. If there's anything that you would like to add from your lens, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I would encourage you all to, make some connections and learn more about the Coalition of Communities of Color. Paula, you're up. I see your hand up.
Oh, well, it wasn't because I was next. I actually had a question on the previous slide. What did you say what service area this covers?
So as I understand it, during the appointments for HB 2100, this appointment was made actually by the governor. So it's not a service area that I would be familiar with. Jennifer, maybe do you know how?
So are you saying like who does CCC serve?
Yeah, what?
So they're not like an agency. So they are a statewide organization. And so they serve all of Oregon. So for example, Coalitions of Community of Color brings together multiple culturally specific organizations. The Urban League is a member of that coalition. We often collaborate on policy, collaborate on events, do all sorts of things. For example, we were part of a cohort that did work related to the Portland City Charter Review and doing educational sessions for our community, doing outreach to charter commissioners, providing testimony, etc. So they're basically a big convener. And so if you're an organization, let's say you don't have capacity to do data analysis, you can go to them and say, hey, I have a question about X. Would love to get your take on it. And they have folks in-house that can do that work for you and get those answers to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Great question, Paula. And I'm sorry I was not able to answer that as articulately as Jennifer, but this is the purpose of doing this snapshot, to ask questions, to get to know, and to make deeper connections across the range of organizations and people that are represented in this virtual room. And next up is the Community Action Program of East Central Oregon, also known as CAPECO. And Paula, I'm not going to read from this slide here. I would love for you to talk about your organization and the people that you serve and the work that you do. Just one caveat, we talk about homelessness and racial disparities. One of the things that was really cool when I went to the CAPECO website was the language accessibility. Right front and center, there's the option to translate the entire web page into maybe 6 or 7 languages. So kudos to CAPECO for having that capability for their constituents.
Okay. All right, well, like it says, we serve 4 counties for the purpose of community action, but then we serve an additional 3 counties for our aging in place services. So we actually have a 7-county service area, and our service area spans from what we consider Meacham in between Pendleton and LeGrand, and goes all the way to Cascade Lock. So we have a pretty large footprint and so forth. The community action program has been around since, of course, you know, the war on poverty. CAPCO was incorporated in late 1980s. I've been with the organization since 91. And, you know, we've primarily focused our work on housing and homeless, but then, you know, expanded that as the needs changed with our community. We were part of the first home buyer education accredited organization providing first time home buyer education. And then we started providing down payment assistance, foreclosure prevention, and so forth. So we have a pretty large swath of services that we provide. Anything, the only thing that we don't do is the youth, like Head Start. We do not have that as part of our program or part of our agency, but we do have some aging out of foster care programs, homeless youth, and so forth. So I think it's a great organization, and the one thing that I am proud of is that we do a comprehensive community needs assessment, taking into consideration all of the data, the true data that we can, you know, that there's backing on, but then we can also, you know, ask more of those touchy-feely kind of questions and go to certain populations and ask those pointed questions on where are we not hitting the mark, and then we can act on those. The other thing is that I feel like we have a very robust, culturally aware staff. If you know anything about Umatilla County, Pendleton sits in the middle, and Pendleton is not usually very diverse, but to the west and to the east are very diverse communities, and we have staff in each one of those locations that can meet those needs. So I don't know what else to say.
How about questions? Any questions for Paula for the work that's being done?
I should mention we also own affordable housing projects. We don't manage them on a day-to-day, but we do own. We're the developers of them.
Can you say more about that, Paula? What does that look like?
Sure. We have 2 projects that are considered affordable housing. So they were built with, you know, home dollars, tax credits, and things like that. One is a 40-unit duplex. One is townhouses, 33 units. We have one project, which is a HUD project for developmentally disabled persons. And then we have scattered sites of farm worker housing in Oregon. And that is an RD project. So we only have 4, and then we're very minor owners in the new housing project, the Wildflower that's going in. They hope to be leased up, starting lease up in July, and we're a minority owner in that as well. I apologize if my enthusiasm isn't great. It's been a long day.
No worries.
But thank you for having me and having this opportunity.
Yeah, I learned something new, and I hope each of the task force members here learned something new. Before we pivot to the next organization, any questions for Paula at all? Alan Evans is not here today. I'm doing a quick scan of the participant list, and I'm not seeing him or anyone from Helping Hands Reentry. Their mission is really to provide a helping hand to sustainable life through resources, recovery, and reentry. I think Alan has been very upfront about his journey and experience, both with homelessness previously, the justice system, and being in recovery. So he is the founder of this organization and has kind of carried that experience through with the mission. They currently are operating 11 facilities in Oregon for people experiencing homelessness through providing shelter beds. Think about maybe 350 or so, also standing up some navigation centers, and that's across 5 different counties in Oregon. So if you haven't had a chance to connect with Alan, feel free to do some deeper connecting to learn more about that organization. Next up is join, and I don't think we have Katrina with us. So they currently exist to support efforts of individuals and families experiencing homelessness with that transition into permanent housing. And they have a direct focus on folks who are unsheltered, so sleeping in their vehicles or directly outside within the Portland metro area. And again, same theme here. If you have more questions about their work, or if you work with them closely and want to share, feel free to do that as well. Up next, League of Oregon Cities.
Hi, sorry, I wasn't sure if you were reading the overview. I'm Ariel Nelson with League of Oregon Cities again. We're similar in a lot of ways to the AOC, to the counties. We're an association. We represent all 241 incorporated cities in the state, large and small. Some of our members, the larger cities, often have their own lobby representation. A big part of what we do is advocacy in the state legislature and federally as well with our federal delegation. So we work closely with those lobbyists, but really also make sure that we're representing our smaller city members who are typically much less resourced. A lot of our conversations with our state and federal partners involve the premise of local control and home rule, which is how our state constitution was developed around local authority. However, we also recognize there's many policies that make sense to be set at a state level. So a lot of our conversations are about what policies make sense at the local and state level. Oftentimes it's difficult to craft a statewide response because cities are so differently situated around the state and with varying resources. I'm part of a team of 5 lobbyists. My focus is on housing, land use, and development. Another big part of what we do is training and education for our members on a variety of topics, whether that's local charters or we did some, when federal resources came out, like the CARES Act or ARPA dollars, we did some trainings for our folks on, different ways to utilize those resources. And we're at the table for a lot of statewide policy conversations. When it comes to housing, cities typically have not had a direct role, but that has been changing rapidly. Our larger resource cities, some of which are entitlement jurisdictions, do receive direct funding from HUD. So they've had housing staff and a role in housing programs for some time. But cities of all sizes are really feeling, the pressures of their residents experiencing homelessness, and so are taking a stronger look at their role. And there's not a lot of available resources, but we've had some really, again, helpful success recently with the homeless pilot funding in the last session. And there's I think a lot of opportunity and energy to harness. Cities are really interested in helping convene and coordinate with their on-the-ground service providers, with their county partners. We also, cities also bring different functions, and when it comes to siting land use development for permanent housing, and are just really looking forward to being a stronger part of the statewide conversation. I think a big piece of that is, local governments are in a unique position where they see the various versions of implementation of different state policies, whether it's coming from an agency or direct from statute. Cities are implementing that on the ground, so have kind of a unique perspective on coordination, connecting dots between various policies. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions just yet. We'll go ahead and move on. Jimmy.
Well, good evening, everyone. Great to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jimmy Jones. I'm the Executive Director of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency. Our agency was chartered in 1967 as part of local government and then became an independent nonprofit in 1969. Like Paula's agency, we were originally chartered as part of the War on Poverty and the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. The agency is a pretty large community action agency. We have 9 major program areas. We have about 500 staff working in those 9 areas. The agency is really divided into 2 types of services. One is early learning on one side of the agency. So we have a pretty large Head Start program with about 1,000 students and their families. We also operate early Head Start, childcare partnerships, and things of that nature. We do the childcare resource and referral program. Most of our program areas cover primarily Marion and Polk County, but that R&R program covers Yamhill as well. And also on that side, we operate what we call Nutrition First, which is the USDA reimbursement program for family-based childcare. That program serves 11 counties in Oregon, including Multnomah and most of the Valley and the Oregon coast. The other side of the agency is housing stabilization. We operate a kind of small reentry project out at the Marion County Transition Center. We operate the standard OHCS suite of programs, including energy and weatherization. We operate Taylor's House, which is the region's only overnight runaway and homeless youth shelter. That's a 10-bed facility. We're hoping to expand that to 20 in the near future. We also operate essentially a day center for runaway and homeless youth. And then the largest part of that puzzle on that side of the agency is our Arches project. It's the largest homeless service provider in the region. It operates a very large day center that sees about 125 people a day in the downtown, part of Salem on Commercial Street. And we operate a bunch of other housing and sheltering projects. We're primarily responsible for all of the warming activities in both Marion and Polk counties. We operate the Arches Inn, which was a turnkey purchase that we made last year. That's an 80-room motel. We can get up to about 100 folks in there, which is about 10% of the unsheltered population in Salem at any one time. And also a Tanner Project, which is a 36-bed transitional housing facility for veterans. It is the only facility outside of Portland that has a preference for female veterans in the state of Oregon. And several other projects along those fronts. We're a little bit different than most community action agencies. We primarily focus on the unsheltered population in our community, and we've been doing work on that front for about 20 years. So that's us in a few seconds there. I'd be happy to take any questions about the agency.
I am not seeing any questions, and y'all can always feel free to connect afterwards if you do have some. Marisa.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Marisa Espinosa, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Policy and Systems Advocate for Northwest Pilot Project. I just want to say right at the beginning, this is a really great opportunity to learn about the organizations represented on this task force. So thank you so much for having this be a part of our agenda. Northwest Pilot Project, in case you're not familiar with it, we are a housing stabilization services provider, and our service area is Multnomah County, which does include but is not limited to Portland. We're also unique in that we focus on older adult homelessness and housing instability. So we serve folks who are age 55 and older. And we've done a range of services over the years. We've been around since 1969. And we've done eviction prevention and housing placement for a very long time. We've actually expanded recently into permanent supportive housing. And so we've actually brought on a number of really amazing new permanent supporting housing case managers. And we've provided retention services for a while, but we formalized our retention program a few years back. So we have a range of services we provide, but we do not operate our own or manage any housing. We have established relationships with landlords all across the county and partnerships. And one of the things that we've been really active in is, contracting with our local continuum of care, but also through the new regional supportive housing services programming in the Tri-County area. We have been providing additional expanded services through the early waves of that funding. And I'll just say a little bit more about older adult homelessness, because I always love every opportunity to kind of spread the word. One of the things we see a lot in older adult homelessness, I like to say, is that it's, a convergence of many systemic factors that lead to housing inequality. The folks that we serve, folks who are older adults, whether you define it as 55 and up or 50 and up, that's actually one of the fastest growing age populations experiencing homelessness. And you can see that reflected in our numbers from the point in time count. We're still waiting on the most recent point in time count in our area, but we definitely started to see this several years ago. And when you just look at the 2017 point in time count compared to the 2019 count, which, that was pre-pandemic, we actually had a 15.1% increase from 2017 to 2019, to where older adults were 23%, so more than 1 out of every 5 people counted as experiencing homelessness under the HUD definition, which, as we know, that means living unsheltered in emergency shelter and in transitional housing. So that doesn't even count the many older adults we serve who are actually doubled up or couch surfing. The other thing you see a lot in older adult homelessness is racial disparities, as we talk about on this task force. When you break down the numbers from that 2019 point in time count, you actually see a really parallel overrepresentation of Black and Indigenous households experiencing homelessness in Multnomah County who are older adults specifically. So the percentage of older adults within each group, the percentage of older adult Native Americans in Multnomah County was about twice as many Native Americans who were counted in the 2019 point in time count. And the percentage of Black and African American households that were older adults were about 1.5 times the amount of folks who were counted in that point in time count total. So that's something I just like to bring to the table because it feels so critical to center these disparities. And, I know that we are obviously tackling a really huge issue on this task force. The last thing I'll say is that one of the things that Northwest Pilot Project has really wanted to be transparent about and put front and center in our advocacy around, modernization of our systems to address homelessness and service provision is that we're actually a white-led or white-dominant culture organization. We don't provide culturally specific services. So one of the things that is talked about in the Multnomah County Continuum of Care, at least, is, becoming a culturally responsive organization. And that's something we take very seriously. We do have bilingual housing case managers. I was actually one of them years ago. And we have really tried to provide a level of service and a level of representation within our service provision that can at least meet that definition. But we don't. Obviously, we aren't a culturally specific organization, and we keep that in mind as we advocate for more culturally specific services in Oregon. We just feel that it's really critical that that be a resource to the folks experiencing homelessness in our community. So I just wanted to add that last piece in there before I forget. And that's all I'll say. Thanks, everybody. Let me know if you have questions.
Thank you. Pause for just a second to see if there are any questions. Okay. Rowan, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, welcome, welcome. We'd love for you to talk about the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence.
Yeah, totally. So I'm Rowan. I'm a proxy for Vanessa Timmons, who is our executive director. The Oregon Coalition provides TA and assistance to our member programs across Oregon We have at least one member program in every county of Oregon, and our goal is to ensure that every person in every county of Oregon has access to sexual and domestic violence advocacy services. We work on bipartisan legislation to increase access for survivors and increase resources for survivors. And a lot of the work that we do is very responsive to what we hear from our member programs. And yeah, that's us. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rowan. We're trucking along. Jill, you are up next to talk about housing and community services.
Hi, everybody. I haven't seen this little blurb, but I'll do my best to explain the agency. There's 3 divisions in Oregon Housing and Community Services. First, we're a housing finance agency. So our main role and mission is to ensure that funding is pushed out across the state of Oregon to serve low-income people, primarily with homelessness and housing needs. Affordable housing and lack of housing is a huge crisis in Oregon and has been for some time, as you all know. It's one of the reasons that we're here. We have 3 divisions. We have the division that I currently am leading, housing stabilization, that really focuses on homeless placement and housing retention for people that are really high need, and partners with a whole lot of you folks. And there's an amazing group of people here. I'm proud to be in the room with all of you. I've learned a lot just listening today. We also have our affordable rental housing division, which is probably the biggest. I'm still learning a lot about the size of the divisions. I'm new. I've been at OHCS about 6 months is all. And affordable rental housing does the development piece. They actually finance the development that a lot of you either are involved in or you're housing folks in of affordable housing. And then there's the home ownership division, which works really hard to help folks who are at the other end of the spectrum needing housing that have the ability to access home ownership with just some help. So OHCS really does cover the full spectrum of folks who, you know, are struggling on the streets, need a hand up and into housing, all the way to folks that just need help accessing their own home. So it's an exciting place to work, and I'm super happy to be here. Anybody that has questions, I welcome them.
Okay, hearing none. So I think we have Senator Anderson, Representative Campos, and is Representative Zika still with us? Do either of you all care to share from your perspective more about the state legislature and your role there?
Well, let me jump on there. I'm Nick Anderson, state senator. Actually, with Senator Jama, who's chairman, I'm vice chair. We both are of the Senate Committee on Housing and Development. And as you can imagine, as already stated, and we all know, housing and home ownership and just housing in general is a crisis. There's not enough of it. And, you know, I think through the legislature, we're trying to find barriers, what's getting in the way, come up with policy changes as needed. You've watched over time us fill a lot of subsidy buckets and a lot of programs of subsidy of all types that assist in housing. And I think the end goal is to certainly get a much higher percentage of Oregonians housed in whatever form they're actually looking for. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Representative Campos or Representative Zika, would you all like to share from your lens as representatives?
This is Rep Zika. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that. I've had bad internet, so I was in and out. But we, gosh, we've been busy with housing the last couple of years. There was during the pandemic, we did the landlord compensation fund was over $200 million to try to keep tenants housed during the pandemic, and it started at 80%, but then we were able to get them fully covered. We did the moratorium on evictions. We've done eviction support to try to keep people housed. We call it Legal Center. Now you can get assistance with if you get an eviction notice. So we were busy the last few sessions. We still have the date looming to see what happens when the funds dry out from the federal government. Also gave us around $200 million. So it was a total of over $400 million that we had for assistance for housing. But you know, there's a need to help people because we're seeing rents increase astronomically just because of the way housing and how much housing is and housing prices. And we know we're 140,000 units short as is, and we're going to have to find ways to make it easier to build. We need some supply issue bills. Unfortunately, I had some supply issue bills that did not make it through the session. I will be passing those off because I am retiring after this session. So I will not be in the legislature anymore, but I will be advocating for housing. That will not end. But I appreciate the work of this group. I've been in a couple groups with underrepresented communities and racial disparities in housing, and we've accomplished a lot in just the last couple of years. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to say thank you to this group and the other ones that I've been a part of.
Thank you, Representative Zika. Representative Campos?
Yeah, I would say Senator Anderson and Representative Zika have said a lot of things that I would agree with and echo. And, I would add, when you talk to most any legislator in the building and you ask them what their top 3 issues are, what they're hearing from their constituents, consistently you hear that housing is an issue and it is showing up in different ways across the state. And what we know is that there are communities that are disproportionately impacted by the crisis that we're facing, which, we all know, being here on this task force and looking at the ways in which we can address some of those disparities. And I think for us as legislators, it's critical that we are listening to these communities, that we're listening to the advocates for these communities, and what can be most helpful in addressing these issues. And from a personal standpoint, I will say that some of the perspectives that I bring as somebody who serves on the vice chair of the House Housing Committee, I come to this work as somebody who grew up housing insecure and as somebody who has worked to help folks get into housing. And so there are so many issues that intersect with this housing piece. And so sometimes, we really do have to zoom out, get creative, and look at all of these other things that intersect with housing. But I'm really proud that this group is here together and that we're looking to address a part of this. And so thank you all for your engagement and your work.
Thank you. Just wanted to note, Sammy Jo was unable to be with us tonight because she's actually attending a conference in Alaska. So Sammy Jo represents the Phillips Tribal Housing Department as its executive director, and their mission is really focused on low-income tribal members and helping them have the opportunity to obtain housing that meets their needs, is affordable, and provides a safe, healthy living environment. They also have a range of programs for their tribal members, which include rental programs, homeownership, development, modernization, emergency housing, and much more. So you should be able to hear from Sammy Jo more about their work by making a direct connection or in future task force meetings. Jennifer.
Yeah, so The Urban League of Portland has been around since 1945. We service all of Oregon and Southwest Washington. The way we describe our agency, even though we call it an agency, even though it's a nonprofit, is that we're pretty much 6 different nonprofits rolled up into one. So we have programs that are rooted in advocacy and civic engagement, which I head up, our community health, housing assistance, senior services, workforce development, youth and education. We are a service provider when it comes to housing. We operate one of the, I believe, the only, at least in the state of Oregon, culturally specific shelter. And that came, or at least was started during the pandemic. And we have seen a lot of success and being able to move folks from transitional housing into permanent housing at a rate higher than the county, because we have a model of providing wraparound services. So if someone comes to us with a housing issue, we take the time and spend the resources to really see, what is the root cause of why that person is presenting with a housing crisis? Is it mental health issues? Is it that they need help in terms of, drafting up a resume? What are the other kind of for lack of a better phrase, comorbidities that someone shows up with that we can address and make sure that they get the services that they need so that they can be on a path of stability and, live the life that they want to live. And so we really take the tact of meeting folks where they're at. And often work with folks that have gone to shelters in the area, but have been turned away due to unconscious bias because they're deemed difficult to work with, they're deemed violent. And really what it boils down to, at least in our experience, is that no one is taking the time to really treat them like a human and really invest the time needed to really, move at their pace and not at the pace of the agency or the nonprofit doing the work. So on the advocacy side, we look at moving policies that seek to get at the root cause issues, or root causes, excuse me, of these systemic issues that we're facing. And so we engage the community, whether it's through educational events, whether it's through testimony writing. We do everything. And so we will continue to do that as long as there is a need. And happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Okay. So from an organizational standpoint, I think, Jennifer, you were the last organization. But I wanted to create space because we do have a task force member that doesn't have a direct organizational affiliation in the sense that each of you shared about your organizations do. And I would love for Nicole to share a little bit about how she came to be appointed on the task force, as much or as little as you would like to, Nicole, but the lens that you represent here.
As you said, I'm just a community member, but I really love getting involved and learning about these different organizations so I can find out where I can focus my energy, that I can be helpful in any way or offer any perspective. I work in Prospect, Oregon, which is a super rural community in Southern Oregon, as a middle school math teacher. I'm on their community club board, and we do like senior lunches and try to address some of those disparities up there. And I come from 6 years of being on the All Care Community Advisory Council. For 4 of those years, I was the committee chair, so I also served on their board of governors, which gave me an opportunity to see a lot of these amazing programs in action. And I'm just super grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Okay, I just learned a whole lot in like less than 60 minutes. I'm hoping that each of you found this as informational as I did, and found that it was a worthy use of time as it was suggested at the last meeting. I think we're going to be ending a little bit earlier, but we do want to talk a little bit about some next steps. Based on the majority of folks that were able to respond to the email that I sent a couple of weeks ago. Thank you all for doing so. We've got our summer series set up at a frequency that works for most all of you, with the understanding that if you're unable to make it, please just send a proxy if you are able. I wanted to give you all a heads up that, again, birthed out of the last meeting that we had. Our next meeting on the 20th of July is really going to be about like a racial equity 101 series. I think our friends from Racial Equity Partners that have been doing a lot of behind the scenes work are going to support the broader team and just helping you all develop a more shared understanding of what racial equity is and what it isn't. From there, I have an ask of everyone. I know that we had that powerhouse 7 weeks where lots of decisions were made. It was an imperfect process, and it resulted in a report on findings and recommendations. I certainly haven't looked at it fairly recently, and I'm not sure either of you have had the opportunity to do so. But in between the July meeting and the August meeting, I am asking for the task force to just do a refresher on that report of findings and recommendations. Not so much the recommendations piece, but more prioritization of the discovery findings. Again, much of the information that's in there, both quantitative and qualitative in nature, survey findings, one-on-one interviews with task force members, HMIS data, other publicly available Oregon-specific data. Just want you all to be in tune with those findings to make sure that you're refreshed on that, because at our next August meeting, we're going to really start talking about some next steps for identifying implementation pathways. Again, that's the new charge that we talked about at the last task force meeting, given to you by the Legislative Assembly. And we want to introduce a roadmap, and high-level overview of the roadmap is really just taking a look at the recommendations that have already been made. The discovery team in the background is going to have some suggestions for you to take or leave. You all make that decision by majority, but it does give you some like a jumping off point, starting point. Because we're going to need to maximize time over the winter. And I can assure everyone that I do not want to have y'all in weekly meetings over like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, New Year's. I too don't want to be in that position. So trying to set us up for success, and so that y'all can really have dialogue leading into our tentative in-person meeting Friday, September 9th. Again, may not work for everyone. I think the message that I walked away with from the last meeting is trying to prioritize having a majority of the task force present. So also wanted to do a little bit of a shameless plug. I've been working with OHCS to figure out like, hey, where are we going to have this thing? Y'all gave some great ideas, but we want to start planning. If any of your organizations have a physical building and are interested in hosting task force members in a more centrally located part of the state, sorry, Paula, I know you're going to have to drive. So sorry. I wish that we could do something with the roundup.
Somewhere to get anywhere when you live in Eastern Oregon.
Thank you for that, Grace. But if any of you as an organization are interested in hosting, please reach out and let me know if that's something that you would be able to do. We're looking at other options as well. Last but not least, it's time to check out. We kind of got through that quickly. We did have some task force members missing this evening, but I think it's kind of cool when you can end a meeting a little bit earlier than expected. I know I don't know what time it is there right now. It's 9 o'clock here. So our checkout question: from your personal or professional lens, please share your hope that the impact of the task force work will have for people experiencing homelessness or housing instability in Oregon.
I can kick us off. I think my biggest hope is that folks listen with intention and are open to change so that we can effectuate the change that our community has been asking for and that has said has been needed. And that, we may not all be happy about the end result, but fundamentally we have to center community. So as long as folks do that, I'm hopeful that we'll get somewhere.
I'd like to share. For me, I'm very hopeful that we can keep in mind. I mean, we all have so much expertise that we're bringing to this table, and keep in mind who we're here for, which is people experiencing homelessness or housing instability. If they are the focus of our work and our interactions and our thinking, we will end up with solid, strong solutions. So that's my hope.
And I would just like to add from a rural perspective. So, it's important for me to, for the group, to have an understanding of what homelessness looks like in more rural parts of our state, and that some things need to be similar or the same, and some things need to be adjusted based on the community, the environment, and the ruralness of the service area, including what we call frontier communities. So that's what my hope is as well.
I'll jump in here, and I really appreciate what folks have brought up so far. For me, I think some of the stuff we did over the winter is kind of still fresh in my mind somehow, although I do look forward to rereading the report. And I think the reason I say that is because, I think one of the things that gave me hope about that process was really getting to leverage the expertise of folks in this task force who are really not only subject matter experts in housing or homelessness or both, but also experts in racial equity. And one of the terms that was used in the recommendations that we made was to really operationalize some of the values of targeted universalism. And so if you don't know what that term means, I highly encourage you to look it up. But basically, if I have to summarize it, I'll just say that is really where we're thinking about our outcomes. And we're thinking about populations that may need a targeted intervention to be able to reduce disparities and to create more positive outcomes. So what we're seeing with racial disparities across our state and across the country, due to a very extremely long legacy of racial inequality, is the byproduct of systems that have been designed to produce certain outcomes. And so what I would like to see come from here is that we really make meaningful changes and shifts in how we do things so that we produce different outcomes. And as Jennifer was saying, this takes work, this takes emotional work, as well as the kind of more logistical, all these other types of work that we do. But as long as that's, the target we have our eye on, that's the goal we're focusing on, I think that we can really have these types of outcomes. I think, and to kind of repeat another thing I remember Jennifer saying a lot over the winter was that, this means a shift from the status quo. It's inevitable. But I'm excited for that. And I think we have the tools available to do that type of work here. And again, make it possible for outcomes to change. Thanks.
I just want to say you said that so wonderfully, and I just want to second what Marissa said. I just hope that marginalized folks, people of color, I hope that queer folks and folks with disabilities experiencing houselessness are and remain to be centered during this conversation. And I hope that we can make meaningful changes for those people.
Got a couple more minutes if anyone else wanted to share their hopes around the impact of this task force. I think folks are tired, and that is okay. It's officially 9:07 here on the East Coast. I'm going to go ahead and call time here. And if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, please reach out to me or anyone on the team. And other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening.